Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Waste Management Phoenix Open Golf DFS video. My name is Dylan Burd, here along with my co-host, Glen Goodman, and we are bringing back what we started at the Masters 2 months later, another golf DFS video, and I could not be more excited.
Yeah, I'm excited, Dylan. We kick things off at the Masters in November, and the season's really in full swing right now. We have a great tournament this week in Phoenix at TPC Scottsdale. It's a really stacked field, and we also have a great tournament all the way out in Saudi Arabia with the likes of Dustin Johnson, Bryson, Finau, Reed is there. But we're going to stick to the USA this week, and it's going to be a great tournament.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Unfortunately, we don't get the fans on the 16th hole this week. Well, we get limited fans. We get some fans. We don't get a packed crowd. That's unfortunate, but I'm still excited. This is a pretty big tournament, Super Bowl week. Great week we got going here. I'm extremely excited to announce as well that this will be a weekly thing from here going forward. Every single Tuesday, this show will be dropping. So just excited to make this a weekly thing and talk golf because I love golf, but I haven't really done any shows on it yet.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you mentioned the 16th hole. I think it's one of the more iconic holes on the tour for sure. They usually pack in at TPC Scottsdale like 180,000 people, 200,000 people at the venue. Obviously, because of COVID restrictions, we'll have around 5,000, I think, this week, maybe a little more around there. I know they've been tampering with it, but yeah, honestly, just a great week with a great tournament, and then the Super Bowl on Sunday. So really good week for sports.
Yeah, for sure. And just before we get started here, wanted to remind you about Thrive Fantasy, who is partnered with SportsBird. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app, but for player props, which is perfect for anyone who loves player props in general. You get 10 prop options and you have to pick 5 of them for the PGA. A point total is assigned to the over, to the under, depending on how risky the bet is. So the more risky the bet is, the more points you get if it were to hit. So for example, if a bet is plus 120 and you hit that, you maybe get like 120 points compared to if you hit a bet that was like minus 110, you would get something around 90 points. So the goal obviously is to accumulate the most points. And a major positive of this PGA Thrive Fantasy contest is that, look, the fact that if you make yourself a little bit too crazy with the cut sweats, there's a new contest every single day on Thrive. So you don't have to worry about the cut sweat too much. You can just, start every day's a new day. You can start up there. Thrive has awarded over $2 million in prizes since launching and guarantees $75,000 in prizes weekly. If you sign up today and use the promo code BURD, B-U-R-D, you receive an instant matchup bonus up to $50 on your first deposit of $20 or more. You can download the Thrive Fantasy app on the App Store or Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. So the link is in the description below to that. Be sure to use the promo code BURD, B-U-R-D, with your first deposit over $20. Now let's get right into the show here and start by, let's start by talking about last week a little bit. We had the Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines in San Diego. What was your take on this whole Patrick Reed saga? Patrick Reed obviously winning the tournament, but had a major controversy on that Saturday.
Yeah, first I just want to say the PGA Tour has to get rid of playing tournaments on multiple courses. So we had the Thursday, Friday split at the North Course. And in my opinion, it's everyone's tracking, everyone's following, and we just don't have any data on the North Course. It's just hard. I really think put the tournament in one course. So we got 4 days at one course this week, which would be nice because 2 weeks ago at the Amex, we had like multiple courses as well. Usually it's 3 courses. 2 weeks ago it was only 2. But yeah, it was a great tournament, obviously. And then we had some controversy with Patty Reed, and there's always seems to be something there. And look, honestly, I kind of like how he's the villain in golf. I think it's not good for how do I phrase this? The rules of golf and maybe the ethical values of golf. But hey, the PGA Tour is being talked about all weekend, and honestly, I loved it.
It's great for the PGA to have like a villain. Like, not a lot of people like Patrick Reed. And I think that, there's controversy that comes with it because, you could see that Rory McIlroy apparently did, I haven't done a ton of research into this and, digging into the details, but apparently Rory McIlroy did a very similar thing that day. It was barely talked about, but since Patrick Reed did it, everyone talked about it. And that's just what Patrick Reed brings to golf. I think it's unique. And I think it's just a great talking point and, just great for the game in general. It's good when the sport has a villain, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. And it's crazy how the villain is, a Masters champion, basically the head of the Ryder Cup team. I think his nickname's Captain America. I mean, bottom line, Patrick Reed is just golf's villain. 95%, I'd say, of people despise the guy. But look, he just is an excellent player. He's number 10 in the world rankings. I think if he finishes third this week in Saudi Arabia, a solo third finish would give him fifth in the world. So he's just a grinder. And we saw last week, everyone was bogeying. He was parring, and that's how he won. He didn't birdie anything on the back nine up until I think the 18th hole, and he won by 5 strokes. So everyone was bogeying, a couple doubles. He's just parring along, and that's how he plays his style of golf on these tough courses. And we're going to see Torrey Pines in June. So he's going to be the man to beat, in my opinion, again.
Yeah, I mean, any of these hard, tough courses, Patrick Reed is going to be up there with the favorites. The way he just grinds out, these types of courses. And once like you said, U.S. Open there once again in June, Patrick Reed is going to have a pretty good shot to win. But let's get right into it here. The course, we got TPC Scottsdale, the stadium course, obviously Scottsdale, Arizona, par 71, 7,261 yards, and Bermuda green. So yardage, not too long of a course at all. Par 71. And I mean, let's start getting into what stats are going to be important this week. So what stats are you looking into mostly?
Yeah, for sure. This week, I'm going to probably weight strokes gain approach as the most. I usually do that pretty much every week. Look, I love ball striking. I love strokes gain approach. Those are really how I maybe cave my models on which guys I'm going to pick. I always weight driving distance ever since Bryson has bulked up. I know there's been some controversy around that. Look, in my opinion, the way I've been structuring my lineups, I've been getting longer hitters, even if you don't need to do a longer hitter. I just truly believe if you hit the ball further, closer to the pin, regardless of the rough right now, you're going to have an advantage. So I curtail my lineups this week. Mostly strokes gain approach. We've seen just great wedge players win this in the past. Matsuyama owns the course. I think JT has 2 top 3s the past couple of years. Just if you're a great wedge player, Webb is the runner up. He's probably arguably the best wedge player on tour. So strokes gain approach is where I'm really focusing my attention on. And as well, other stats, par 5 efficiency, which I know you're really big into, Dylan.
Yeah, par 5 efficiency is definitely something I'm looking at today. So I already created a custom stat model on Fantasy National Golf. So I'll just kind of go down what I made this model. So right now, and again, this model is completely subject to change right now. This is just, just a rough estimate based on just the first day of me doing research because we are recording this on Monday night. Obviously things I could come across that can make me change my opinions a little bit. But I got strokes gained off the tee, 10%, strokes gained approach, 22%. That's the most, as you said, for me as well. Strokes gained putting. I don't like to obviously weight that too much, but, putting always should be weighted, in my opinion, just a slightly, because, there are some guys who can't putt at all. Cough, cough, Luke List, putting at 7%, ball striking, 18%, par 5, strokes gained on par 5s, I should say, 15%, greens in regulation, 12%, proximity 150 to 175, 10%, and then proximity 200 plus 6%. So I know that some of those kind of double dip because ball striking and then off the tee and green regulation, like those kind of all overlap a little bit. But if those are the most important things, I don't mind that I'm double dipping too much into my model. I do think the par 5s are going to be important because there are only 3 of them. So you better make sure that you are, birdieing these par 5s given the opportunities. So just want to talk about the par 5s quickly here. All of them. So the par 5, as I said, there's only 3 of them. Hole 3 is a 551 yard par 5. Hole 13 is 540 yard par 5. And then hole 15 is 545. All of them have a birdie rate of 38% or higher. So again, you got to be birdieing those holes. And I believe that the hole that's birdied the most is hole 13, 44.8% birdie rate there. So, you got to be killing these par 5s if you're going to stay in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, every tournament you basically look at and who wins the tournament, people that attack these par 5s. Putting, obviously, tournaments are won with putting, great wedge play, and par 5 efficiency. It really is true. If you're parring these par 5s, especially here at TPC Scottsdale, you're going to be losing strokes against the field. Last week, again, at Torrey Pines, those par 5s were mammoths. I think we had 2 around 600 yards. It was really no gimme of any birdies. There's water in on 18 last week. So we take a little bit of an easier stride this week with the par 5s. You really need to get on the green in 2 here. And it's truly important. You cannot be parring these par fives. You need to be birdieing them. Um, and effectively just don't lose strokes against the field.
Yeah, and I mean, just to touch on a little bit more, a few of the other stats that I put on that may have been a little bit more unclear here. So this is per Fantasy National Golf, but approach shot distribution, it's pretty much easily the most for 150 to 175 yards in terms of proximity. So that's why I added that in. Those shots from 150 to 175 are going to be the most frequent and therefore, some of the most important as well. So given that, I did want to weight that in my model a little bit. And then, you may say 200 plus. Why are you weighting that if it's not that long of a course? Well, those are actually the second most frequent shots. So I figured I'd weight that at 6%, not put that too much in there, but still give it a weighting. But yeah, like we mentioned, I think par fives are going to be huge. Green and regs is going to be huge as well as the winners. I mean, the winners pretty much kill the entire field in terms of greens and regulations. That's going to be very important as well.
Yeah, for sure. I always build my models around ball striking. And I don't think you mentioned it, but I also love weighting birdie's opportunities gained. So how many opportunities does this player have within, let's say, 15 feet of the hole? And honestly, those are where you get the guys of like Luke List there. Now, Luke List is probably the worst putter on tour. He three putts from 12 feet. He three putts from 8 feet. He three putts anywhere. But in my honest opinion, if he can get a hot putter for 1, maybe 2 days, he's arguably a top 20 ball striker on tour, probably top 15. He's been actually absolutely killing it this past week. And I think he shot like 66 on Sunday at the Farmers. Look, if he gets enough 15-foot looks, I just think those putts are just going to fall one of these days and maybe win you some good money in DFS.
Yeah, Luke List, a guy that's a roller coaster. I played him last week. Unfortunately, my lineup's botched because, again, I hate these two different courses. I had so much hope. Most of my guys ended up, I wasn't even thinking about it too much, but most of my guys were playing the North course on the first day. I was like, oh, I'm sitting pretty. And then next thing you know, we got Scotty Scheffler shooting +7 on a Friday, and he misses the cut by a stroke. So, I mean, these guys are killing me with the two different courses. Finally, here we get one course the whole week. But yeah, Luke List, bottom line, we're going to talk about him later. The guy is a roller coaster. Now let's start off here with the 10K range. We have Jon Rahm priced as the highest ranked golfer, and rightfully so, at 11,200. Then we got Xander Schauffele at 11,000. Then we got Justin Thomas, 10,800. Rory McIlroy, 10,600. And then Webb Simpson, who I believe Webb Simpson, the defending champion of this tournament, is 10,100.
Yeah, and Dylan, from this $10,000 range, you really can't go anywhere wrong. I mean, Jon Rahm, arguably the best player on tour outside of, let's say, Dustin Johnson or JT. We're going to see two of them in this week's field. But how do I really choose my 10K guys? They're all the same in win equity, in my opinion. So where are we really focusing our attention? And just ownership. If I can get someone at 12, 13%, as opposed to, let's say, 22, 23%, that's just going to make that big of a difference. I really weight all these guys the same with win equity. So then I just pivot to ownership percentages.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a huge point. Now, just think about Patrick Reed last week. The guy was ranked in the, priced in the 10Ks. Everyone's saying, why is Patrick Reed priced in the 10Ks? I'm not going to go anywhere near that guy, if he's priced that high. That's just, that's what the casual DFS player is saying. But he was, single digit ownership. He came along with only single digit ownership. I forgot what the number was. I believe it was around 6%.
Yeah, I think it was like 6.7. I mean, insanely low. Xander Schauffele was insanely low as well. And look, that was a 1-2 finish right there. So ownership is really, with these top guys, the only baseline that I currently make, because I evaluate win equity really much the same. There's not that one top guy. Maybe DJ is that guy, but outside of Rahm, JT, Xander, Rory, I guess Rory is maybe a little bit lower echelon tier just because he's more sporadic recently. But any of these top 4 or 5 guys, they all have the same win equity, in my opinion. So I'm just pivoting to ownership at that point.
Yeah, and early ownership, numbers coming in here. Now, I don't want to weight ownership numbers on Monday night too much, but from my experience on fantasynationalgolf.com, the ownership may swing 1 or 2% in each way, but it won't be significant change. Now, right now, Jon Rahm is coming in at 17.1%, Xander Schauffele at 17.5%, Justin Thomas at 19.8%, projected to be the highest owned player And then Rory McIlroy at 12.4%, which is the lowest out of the 10K range. And then Webb Simpson at 15.7%. So I want to talk a little bit about Rory McIlroy here at 10-6, coming in as the lowest, owned golfer. He's never played here before at, the Waste Management. Is this a warranted low ownership, or is this somewhere that you could possibly go? Like, is this somewhere that you follow your rule and say, you know what, low ownership, I'll go there? Or is this someone you say, he hasn't played here before, he hasn't been at his best, I'm not going to go there?
So I'm not going to wait anything that he hasn't played there. He's Rory McIlroy. He'll run through the course this week before he tees off on Thursday. But look, Rory has really been essentially a roller coaster. Ever since the tour restart, the Chuck Schwab in June, he's been a definition of a roller coaster. I know I just repeated that phrase, but it's really true. For a guy always in a 10K range, maybe even reach 11K one week, his results have been shaky. He could not have strung together 4 consecutive good Rory rounds. And he did this past weekend too. The guy just couldn't hit a putt. He drives the ball phenomenally. Granted, he's in the rough a lot of the time, but that's fine for him. Just, I guess, inconsistency. Can he put together 4 good rounds? And this past weekend, he was in great contention to win after Friday. He had a dull weekend and finished 6 under and was 8 strokes behind Patty Reed. But look, I always love Rory, and I always say 12.4% Rory is like almost must have Rory, because his win equity is obviously, in my opinion, the same as all those other guys. So how many times, you got to say to yourself, how many times does Rory win on tour? And hopefully it's one of these weeks. And if you get at 12.4% as opposed to 20%, it really does make a difference. And especially big GPPs and even cash games.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to Pat Mayo's podcast last week, or I should say YouTube video podcast, whatever you want to call it. But bottom line is, and he made a good point, is that Rory McIlroy comes in with different expectations than a lot of golfers. So we say he's been all over the place, which he has been. But I think that your floor with Rory is probably like 20th place. Like if you're looking at his past tournaments, we had the Farmers, he placed 16th, and then obviously he had a two month I should say PGA Tour break, where he placed 5th at the Masters, 17th at Zozo, 21st at the CJ Cup, but then 8th at the US Open. Like he's all over the place, but he's all over the place within that top 20. So I don't think it's like a massive risk where you have to worry about him blowing up and shooting +8. Like this is Rory McIlroy. I also agree with you that it doesn't matter that he hasn't played here. I mean, the guy he's Rory McIlroy, and he's right now, last 24 rounds, he is, despite him, being all over the place, as we said, he's still first in strokes gained off the tee, and he always has that going for him. It's really just his approach, which in his last 24 rounds is at, 68th. Not great, obviously. Proximity 150 to 175 at 64. But for a guy like Rory McIlroy, I mean, that could change at any moment if you're that good at golf. And I think for the low ownership, for if he is at 12%, I do think that he becomes a must own if you're playing. I mean, if you're playing multiple lineups, for sure.
I'm all for the low ownership, but I guess if you're paying $10,600 for a guy on DraftKings, you can't have him afford to be 20th place.
Right.
Then you just need the other 19 guys to be like 7, 8K, no one has the winner or whatever, like a Brian Gay type week. But yeah, Rory, his approach has been wild, but you know what? He feels good about his game, so I'm going to trust him. He's a phenomenal golfer, of course, and 12% Rory, I'm definitely on board. There's no reason why I shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, what I would recommend personally is if you're a guy that's only going to play one lineup, I'm not sure I would go to Rory, but if you're going to play 3, 5 lineups, you should definitely fit him in at least one. Now, is there anybody else that you want to highlight here? I do want to highlight Xander because he came up first in my model, and this is a guy we spoke a lot about last week. You had a huge stake in Xander last week. You played him in DFS. You bet on him, in multiple matchups, and it paid off. The guy finished second. I was too caught up on, course history where, the guy was not good, missed the cut a bunch of times, and it didn't matter. Xander Schauffele is probably, one of the best version, if not the best version of himself on tour so far right now. I mean, he came up number 1 player in my model for a reason. 11th, this is the last 24 rounds, 11th in strokes gained off the tee, 19th strokes gained approach, 1st in strokes gained putting, obviously huge there, 12th in strokes gained ball striking, 3rd in strokes gained off of par 5s, 12th in greens and regulation gained, 17th in proximity, 150 to 175. So pretty much all these stats that I mentioned as key stats, he's placing in the top 20. And this guy, as you said to me, before we recorded this guy truly does not have a weakness in his game. And that's it. He's been unbelievable.
Yeah, you hit it on the nail. Xander Schauffele is probably the most consistent player currently on tour. He hasn't won since 2019, which is fine. I mean, that's variation, that's variance. Xander Schauffele does everything well, drives the ball well. His approach game is great. Around the green's great. His putting's great. Honestly, there's no weakness in his game. The only weakness in fantasy and DFS is he usually has very high ownership. Most of the time, it's worth the high ownership. You told me last week, Dylan, I'm going to stay off Xander because he hasn't made a lot of cuts at Torrey Pines. And then I said, I don't know. He's that good of a golfer. Course history, I think, is a lot of overhyped stuff, especially in limited starts. I think he missed the cut on the number. All his missed cuts could be variance. He just puts together 4 great rounds, whether the great rounds are just steady along, no bogey free rounds. He's just a very consistent golfer. He's never going to blow up, and he really has great win equity. And I'm a Xander guy. I played him in some matchups last week. I'm happy. I had him against Finau. Finau got wet on 18. I had him against Rahm. Rahm got wet on 18, and then he beat Rory. But yeah, Xander he's that guy that's Mr. Consistency. And I think he really has a good chance to win this week. And the odds show it too. I think he's like 8-1.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who, like you said, he hasn't won in a while, but it's coming soon. Like, it is going to come one of these weeks. I mean, he's been second place a million times,
A ton.
finishes. I mean, this guy is eventually going to break through. So I do think that Xander Schauffele is a good option. Are there any other specific highlights guys you want to highlight here, I should say, in the 10K range? I mean, Justin Thomas, I mean, he's, right now I said he's projected for the most ownership. I will probably own him in one lineup, but I wouldn't go all in on Justin Thomas just because of that high ownership. If you are playing multiple lineups. Now, my one thing about Justin Thomas is ranks 4th in my model. And the one place he's been struggling a bit is off the tee. Lost 1.9 strokes off the tee at the Tournament of Champions. So, I mean, that's not a huge concern for me. And he does like this course also. He's come in 3rd place here the last 2 years. So, I mean, again, like you said at the very beginning, I don't really think you can go wrong with any of these guys that are in the 10K range. And honestly, if you're playing multiple lineups, you may as well. And let's say you're playing 5 lineups, I would not be opposed to just, picking like 3 of them and just spreading them out across the 5 lineups. And what I even want to say as well is and I want to like make sure I highlight this because me and you both discussed this and we both agree. This is the perfect field in my opinion. And we'll talk about this as we keep going on with the pricing. This is the perfect field for stars and scrubs. I think you could even get 2 of these guys and then stack up on the 7K, 6K range because the 8K range, and we're going to talk about that soon. The 8K range is dreadful this week.
I completely agree. Hit the nail on the nail. Look, JT is a phenomenal golfer. There's no weaknesses in his games, maybe a little bit inconsistency putting. You've said off the tee recently hasn't been his normal levels. Usually, he gets on the tee and then a couple times, maybe 3-4 holes in a row, you just see the right sign because the ball's an unknown. But yeah, again, these 10K guys, in my opinion, you look at all of them, they all have the same win equity. And stars and scrubs, I completely agree. You really could pair 2 of these guys and then dip right into the 7s and skip the 8s. I mean, that's how I do it. And that's how we get Luke List every week in his putter. But yeah, so let's move along to the 9K range now. It's an interesting range with a lot of really good golfers and golfers that haven't been playing well recently. Scheffler, we may get a low-owned bargain price on him. Danny Berger's back in the field this week. Matsuyama's won here, I believe, twice. So, and the phenom, Will Zalatoris, I'm obsessed with Will. He's just such a good golfer, coming in at 9,000 flat. So, Dylan, where are you looking at this 9K range, and who are you pivoting to?
Yeah, so just to read off this full 9K range, not a big 9K range. There's only 7 golfers. Hideki Matsuyama, 9,800. Daniel Berger, 9,600. Sanjay Im, 9,400. Harris Inglis, 9,300. Ryan Palmer, 9,200. Scotty Scheffler, 9,100. And Will Zalatoris, your guy, I'm a huge fan as well, at 9K flat. So What I'm looking at here is I'm thinking that if I am not able to stack two 10K guys, or 10K plus, I should say, I'm thinking that I'm definitely going to go a 10, a 9, and then go right down. And probably the three that I'm looking at right now are Matsuyama, who hasn't been great lately, but again, I think course history matters sometimes, and sometimes it's a little bit overhyped. So, for example, I overhyped it last week for Xander, not thinking he was going to finish top 10 or top 20 because of his course history. But I think that for some golfers, playing at a course that you like could really break yourself out of a slump. So I think that Matsuyama is going to be a guy that I have interest in. Daniel Berger, I mean, the guy's been lights out since the Chuck Schwab. So, I mean, that's another guy that I'll have interest in. And then, Zalatoris, another guy that I'll have interest in. Now, unfortunately, these guys are also going to come with some ownership. Now, if you're looking at a guy like Ryan Palmer at 9,200, that's a guy that comes 10th in my model. But am I really going to play Ryan Palmer at 9,200? That's something that I have to decide. Maybe it's worth it with his low ownership that he has coming in right now, currently on Fantasy National Golf. Ryan Palmer is supposed to be at 8.5% ownership, Harris English at 7.7, Scotty Scheffler at 6.3, and then all those other guys in the 9K range are probably going to be, around 11, 12, and then Daniel Berger right now coming in at 17.9%. So you could possibly get an ownership discount with those three guys that you're possibly not, just looking past.
Yes, perfectly said, Dylan. Let me touch on Daniel Berger first. Per Fantasy National, par 4 distance between 400 and 450 yards in his last 50 rounds. He ranks number 1 in the field. I think you have 4 or 5 of those this week at TPC Scottsdale. So I love Berger. Berger's a great golfer. He's one of those consistent golfers as well. And I really think he has a big week. Ryan Palmer, you said? Now look, I guess 10 weeks ago, you didn't think you'll ever see Ryan Palmer $9,200 in DraftKings, but he really has been lights out. He's been consistently ball striking the ball phenomenally. His irons have been phenomenal. He sinks his putts. He's just been a consistent golfer. Now, it is a high price for Palmer in regards to maybe his overall track record, but the guy's a top 30 golfer in the world. I think Ryan Palmer seriously can get another top 10 this week. I think he was in the final or maybe the second to last grouping at the Farmers. He's just putting together amazing results. And I mean, it's hard to not play him if some guy is that consistent. And with low ownership projected currently, why not stack one of those 10K guys, go to Ryan Palmer, and then see what's left? I mean, that's not a bad decision.
Yeah, Ryan Palmer, second at Farmers, 41st at Sony, and then fourth at Tournament of Champions, fourth at the Zozo already in October. But those last those last 4 tournaments, he's finished in the top 4, and that's pretty impressive for a guy like Ryan Palmer, who didn't have a great track record coming in. Gained 7.8 strokes putting at the Farmers. So I mean, look, the guy's just been on fire. He's gained strokes against the field putting in each of his last 5 tournaments played. So look, I think that Ryan Palmer, if he was coming along with high ownership, he would not be in consideration for me. But I think the fact that he is going to, supposed to be coming in with that low ownership makes him a possibility for me.
More shares for us then. Now, Scotty Scheffler, you mentioned, who's interesting. I think he could be a good bounce back candidate. I think he has 2 missed cuts in a row. Scotty's a good golfer. He obviously consistently has a high price tag next to his name. I think he was second on Thursday, 1 stroke back of the lead or something like that at the Farmers, and then ended up obviously missing the cut on Friday. If his name has low ownership attached to it also, I'll be all over it. I think bounce back candidates in DFS are really where money can be made. Look at Bryson at the US Open. He was completely struggling before then. And then at the US Open, you get Bryson like 6-7% owned. I mean, sometimes you just have to do that and you have to bite the bullet on that. And who knows? Will Scheffler be 6-5%? Who knows? Could he be worth it? Yeah, I'd rather play him over Harris English. I'd rather play him over Sung J M. Matsuyama is a question mark with good course history. So yes, he could be a bounce back candidate, as you said, coming to a course where he's familiar with. But yeah, the 9K range is pretty much consistently good golfers, of course, but you really got to pick your spots here.
Yeah, I want to touch on. So I think like my one downfall of DFS right now, especially with golf, is that I get so mad at these guys, Harris English and Scotty Scheffler, who burned me last week. Harris English shooting like a plus. I didn't have him in DFS, but I had him in another pool that I do. Guy goes +7 on the first day, and it's the worst feeling ever if you have a guy in a competition and he's out on day one. Scotty Scheffler was the complete opposite, had a great day one and botched, but you know what? Just because a guy did not play well the week before, and again, Scotty Scheffler, he really just had one bad day. Just because a guy didn't play well the week before doesn't mean that he can't play well the week after. It's a whole, week between. It's a different course. And I think that that's important for me and everybody else watching. I think it's important to put aside what happened in the past and, just look at this like it's a completely fresh slate. Now, I do want to touch on a little bit more in detail. I do want to touch on Matsuyama and Will Zalatoris. Now, Matsuyama, as I said, he hasn't been great lately, but he has those wins here, those 2 wins coming in 42nd in my model. And I think really the main thing with Matsuyama is he can't putt. Like the guy is 108th on tour in his last 24 rounds in putting. That's been a problem for Matsuyama his whole career. But, you catch him on a hot putting week and, you never know what could happen. He also is, ninth on the tour in stroke last 24 rounds, ninth on tour in strokes gained on par 5. So if his irons are working right now, they're not great. He's approaches 40th on tour last 24 rounds. But if you get those irons working, get a hot putter at a course that he likes a lot, you never know what could happen. So, I mean, just for the fact that he's won here twice, I will consider him for sure. And then looking at Will Zalatoris here, this guy coming in second in my model. That's how good he has been. Third on tour right now, last 24 rounds, strokes gained approach, 6th in ball striking, 2 on strokes gained par 5s, 9th in greens and regulation gained, 1st in proximity from 200 plus. The one thing holding him back from winning tournaments, 102nd on tour in strokes gained putting. So could Willie Z catch that hot putter and finally win and, win here? I think it's possible. And I definitely think that at 9K, he'll be in consideration as well. He has to be.
For sure. Yeah. And just to go back briefly on Matsuyama, what do you think of Hideki Matsuyama as a golfer overall? Great wedge play, poor putting, but look, again, his irons are going to be good, hopefully, and definitely has the win equity as well, top 5 equity as well. And Willie Z obviously is worth the hype. 24 years old, has PGA Tour card now from the Korn Ferry Tour. A top 5 at the US Open, top 6 this past week or something. Just really good. Can't complain about him at all. Really well-rounded player. The putting is questionable, but look, he did
gain. I'm looking at this right now. He did gain 3 strokes putting at Farmers. So hopefully that putting is coming around. And if it does, then I mean,
yeah, and if it is, then great. But look, you were not waiting guys really much on putting. Last week, the POA greens were very tricky greens. And as a new golfer that he is, on tour at least, on PGA Tour, that's never a good test for you to go right there. But this week we get a little bit easier greens as opposed to the POA. I know Rory was complaining about the POA greens, bumpy stuff like that, just tough greens. But yeah, I think Will Zalatoris is going to be a very popular play this week by the DFS community.
Yeah, for sure. And now let's move to the 8K range, which I have a feeling we're not going to spend that long talking about because, as you said, me and you are both thinking stars and scrubs. And if you're playing stars and scrubs, you're not going to look at that 8K range much. Now, again, we talk about, how you have to put things in the past aside. Sometimes if a guy has one bad week and burns you, doesn't mean you should definitely go away from him the next week. Now, that being said, the 8K range is consistent of a bunch of guys who literally have had multiple bad rounds in a row, and that is where you shy away. And, there are a few guys in here that I am interested in, but it would only be at the very bottom of the 8K range. Let me quickly run through here the 8K range. We have Louis Oosthuizen at 8,900. We have Brooks Koepka at 8,800. Matthew Wolff at 8,700. Guy killed me last week. Ricky Fowler, 8,600. Bubba Watson, 8,500. Another guy who killed me last week. Billy Horschel, 8,400. Gary Woodland, 8,300. Russell Henley, 8,200. Siwoo Kim, 8,100. And then Brian Harman, 8,000 flat. So who are you completely avoiding the 8K range? Or are there any guys that you say, you know what, maybe I'll take a chance on?
So yes, Most likely, I'm going to avoid most of them, but I will play a couple just because of bounce back purposes and upside. I think Matthew Wolf, I put an asterisk next to his name. He withdrew last week because of a bad hand, aka I shot 7 over on Thursday or whatever, and just have been lost since the U.S. Open. He's been completely lost. He cannot drive the ball. Every drive is awful, like horrendous, out of bounds, penalty, bunker, rough. Guy just lost his driver. But look, he's Matthew Wolf. He could easily light up a ton of birdies in a row. We've seen him play second at the U.S. Open. I think he was second at a tournament right before that, maybe the Zozo. So he's a type maybe I'll put an asterisk on. Brooks, I'm avoiding 3 missed cuts in a row. First time in his career, I think he'd done that. But I'm still avoiding him. He has shown no promise. And I'm not going to pay 8.8 for him this week. Billy Horschel as well, just inconsistency at its finest. Gary Woodland as well, maybe pulls together a couple good rounds, but Gary's been losing off the tee where he usually gains, which is concerning. But you mentioned Russell Henley, $8,200, Dylan, and Russell Henley fits this course extremely well. He's a great iron player. He's always going to gain a strokes gained approach. I'm all in on Henley. I'm a Henley fan. I play him quite a bit, and he usually makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, Henley is a guy that I'm looking at, in this 8,000 range, maybe one of the only ones I play, honestly. But Henley's a guy who I've played in the past a lot. He's worked out for me, and I would be very, very surprised if I don't end up playing Henley. Now, Henley, he is going to come around with some decent ownership right now, projecting at 12.1%.
Always.
Yeah, always does. But you know what? There's a good reason for it. He's 11th in my model, first in strokes gained approach. He's ridiculous with approach. Like he's almost like top 5 or first, like every single time I plug in a model and he's playing a tournament. First in his last 24 rounds, strokes gained approach, 4th in ball striking. So I mean, the strokes gained par 5 is not great, 92. But if your approach is great, then that could switch in a second. Greens and regulation also, he ranks 20th. So I mean, I think that Russell Henley is a solid option here. If you're gonna play the 8K range, in my opinion, this week, I think you have to look at these low end guys. Your Russell Henleys, your Siwoos. Look, I'm completely for Siwoo and Brian Harman this week as well. Now both those guys, Siwoo ranking 18th in my model and Brian Harman ranking 13th in my model, and these guys, they were just playing really, Siwoo Kim especially playing really, really well lately. Brian Harman also, he's been great putting, but like just looking at his stats that matter a little bit more here, strokes gained par 5, he ranks 14th, Brian Harman, proximity 200 plus 17th, greens and reg 26th, Siwoo Kim also 14th in greens and reg. And then like also just he won the tournament, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, Siwoo won 2 weeks ago.
Right. So yeah, these guys are they're playing well. And I think those 3 guys are going to be the guys I look at in the 8K range. Otherwise, I'm not going to go much higher than that.
Yeah, my honest recommendation is the Stars and Scrubs lineup. 2 guys on the upper tiers. Skip the 8K range in full. Not saying any of these guys can't win the 8K range, but you look down at the 7K range and maybe even the upper 6s, and you say to yourself, Dylan, these guys in the upper 7s, mid 7s, maybe even low 7s has maybe the same win equity as some guys in the 8s. I look at Burns has pretty high, top 10, top 15 equity. Day, Carlos Ortiz, Corey Connors, Norlander finished, I think, second this past week, or maybe top 5, top 10, somewhere around there. Emiliano Grillo's in the low 7s. These guys have pretty much the same equity, top 10, top 15, top 20 equity. And that's all you can ask for from this range, as the guys in the 8K range. I don't know why I can't say that tonight, but yeah, I think the 7K range is the way to go. Just construct your lineups this week.
Yeah, this is where DFS is going to be won this week, the 7K range, and I want to get into the 7K range right now. There's a lot of guys that you could look at down here, and they rank highly in my model. Obviously, you mentioned Corey Connors, 6th in my model. Sam Burns, who played great last week, who I had in DFS, one of my one DFS guys that actually worked out for me last week. at ranking 8th in my model. And then you have guys like Norlander, Chris Kirk is 24th in my model. Henrik Norlander, 26th in my model. You mentioned Norlander played great last week. Emiliano Grillo, I mean, we know what we're going to get with him. You're going to get a lights out approach game, and you're going to get a guy who struggles, to putt. And, but he
My
ranked,
type of guys.
yeah, he ranks 16th in my model. And then
Benny on.
And we finally get to him here. Luke List. I mean, I would be very surprised if I don't end up playing Luke List. The guy is, been really, really good. He's 5th off the tee, 8th in strokes gained on par 5s, 22nd in ball striking, 23rd in proximity from 200 plus. Now his problem, he's 127th at putting, but he's like any other bad putter. Yeah, occasionally you get him on a decent day, and then if Luke List is having a decent day putting, then the guy's going to be shooting 6 under because the rest of his game is so good. So these are some guys that I am looking at here. Are there any other guys that you're looking at as well?
Yeah, I mean, you hit them. How do I figure out who I'm playing on these low 7,000 range, high 7s, mid 7s? Guys who can get birdies in bunches. Grillo strikes that. Luke List strikes that. Norlander's been playing very well recently. I'm going to avoid the Spieths, the Zach Johnsons, the Todds. Cammy Champ, obviously, I weigh driving distance every week, and he always comes in number 1 or 2, depending if Bryson's in the field or maybe Finau as well. He's been struggling mightily recently, especially with his irons. But look, I always play Grillo. I always play List. I like those ball strikers. It's like whenever I look at Tourcast, I always see Luke List 15 feet within the hole. Now, phenomenal. That's going to make his birdie opportunities, percentages gained way high. His opportunities gained percentages way high. The putts just have to fall. And you know what? If he puts average, or maybe even a little below average, he's going to get his return on $7,200 right there, which is all you can ask for in a guy in this range. But that's where I'm going with the 7K range. I think that pretty much sums up the 7s, avoiding Spieth.
Before we move on to the 6, I do want to highlight a few tips for the 7K range, more specifically to this slate, but also just in general. So a lot of these guys that we mentioned, I mean, they're playing really well. Everyone sees that they're ranking high in the model. I mean, some of the guys we mentioned, Corey Connors coming at 19% ownership. That's something
very high.
That's something that I would consider fading because, Corey Connors is a great approach player. This course fits him well. But is there really a point of playing Corey Connors at 19% ownership when you could just go to Carlos Ortiz, who's 100 less at 6.1% ownership? Carlos Ortiz is playing phenomenal lately. So that's something you have to look at. Also, Max Homa, he's playing really well lately as well. And he's first in strokes gained par 5 in his last 24 rounds, but he comes in at 12.2% ownership. That's not obviously as bad as 19, but Max Homa, that's a guy you should probably consider fading at that price as well, 7,900. Now Burns is going to come in 12.6% ownership, Chris Kirk 11.2, Henrik Norlander 12.1, Brendan Steele 9.7, Ben On 12.2, Luke List 10.5. So you know what? My recommendation to you would be, you could still play these guys. Would I play all of them in the same lineup? No, you should probably make sure that you have at least 1 or 2 guys that are getting around 6-7% ownership or less, just to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. I'm glad you pointed that out because that's my always stance in DFS as well. If you're picking a guy in the 7K range and they're getting ownership above 15%, 12, 15%, there is no reason why I will play him. If they end up beating me that week, sure, go right ahead. But I can pivot to someone that's maybe 7, 8%, maybe 6% owned in that range. And in my opinion, sure, get pretty much top 20, top 25 equity right there. I think you have to always play the lower percentage there. It just gives you that big, more of a chance of competing and winning. And especially in these big GPP contests where there's thousands upon thousands of people, you're not going to want to play a guy that's 19% owned in this range. You just don't want to do it. And if they happen to beat you that week, you say, okay, they beat me. I'll move on till the next week. I mean, that's just the way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, two guys that, and I'm not saying don't play those guys that we mentioned. You definitely could just be wary of the ownership. And I mean, like I said, Carlos Ortiz coming in at 6.1% could be a good pivot option. And also, who was I just looking at down here that I was also considering? Emiliano Grillo, who we mentioned, 6.7%. So those guys, those are types of guys that maybe you combine a Grillo and a Luke List. So you have the high ownership on List, but you have the low ownership on Grillo or something of that nature. Now, I do want to move down to the 6K range where, same rules apply as 7K range. Obviously, you're not going to move towards guys who are getting tremendously high ownership. Now, luckily in the sixes, you don't really have to worry about that as much. But I think that, this 7K range, 6K range is where this tournament is going to be won. And one guy who I want to mention coming in at 5.5% ownership as of Monday night, who ranks tremendously high in my model. He is, let me get this up right here. He is ranking third in my model at 6,900. And that is the St. John's alumni himself, Keegan Bradley. So third in my model, and the reason why, he's 18th off the tee in strokes gained his last 24 rounds, second in approach, second ball striking, 12th in par 5, 22nd in greens and regulation gain, 10th in proximity 150 to 175, 25th in proximity 200 plus. Only issue, he's 125th in putting. But you know what? If I'm going to get those crazy numbers across the board for every other stat, I'm not going to worry too much about putting. A guy can get a hot putter, and Keegan Bradley is a guy that I think is going to be a phenomenal play, and definitely a guy that I'll have in my lineups this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. These guys down there, I always play the good ball strikers, the good approach guys, good tee to green, all that stuff. I weight putting at absolutely zero down here. Putting wins the tournaments, obviously, but you got to get on the green to putt. You're not going to hit those 40 footers. If you get within 15 feet of the hole, then you have a better chance. Can Keegan Bradley hit those? He said he's a Johnny local guy, so we like that. I also like Doc Redman in this range. I was big on Doc 2 weeks ago. He kind of let me down. I was big on him last week as well, and he let me down again. But I am a Doc stan. I enjoy Doc Redman. He's had, I think, 3 top 5 finishes since the restart. I think he's going to win one of these weeks. He's a phenomenal ball striker, just really off the charts. And according to my model, I weighted approach 40%, birdie's opportunity gain 25%, par 4 from 400 to 450, 15%, and driving distance 20%. And Doc Redman right here ranks, let's see, 22nd in my model. Great approach guy, good on some longer par 4s. And again, with him, it's the putter. It's all these guys, it's the putter. I'll always play Doc. I'll feel bad when I miss when Doc wins that I don't have any equity in him.
Doc ranks 21st in my model, so I do agree with that. Now, I did mention the Keegan Bradley thing with putting. I'm looking at his past results, and this is actually astounding, but I want to read this off because it makes my point and it makes our point so well here. So Keegan Bradley missed the cut on the last 2 tournaments, and that's something that's going to scare people away. And I mean, that's why he's coming in at 5.5% ownership. But the guy, he went here's the last 6 tournaments he's played. Here's his strokes gained putting: -2.5, -7, -4.6, -3.7, -2.7, -3.9. Now, the tournament before this was Sanderson Farms. He had a good putting week and gained 3 strokes, finished 4th. So, I mean, that's the type that, he's literally gained an approach his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He's gained an approach his last 10 tournaments. So, and he's gained tee to green in all 10 of those as well. So, and he's gained off the tee in 8 of those. So, he's killing these other statistics. It's literally just his putting that's killing him. So I'm going to bet on him having even a decent putting week, because if he could get like -1 instead of -4.5, then you could see him finish possibly top 20, like the RSM. He finished 15th place while losing 4.6 strokes putting. Like, I mean,
and I'm looking at him right now, Dylan, and the Workday Charity Open, where Morikawa beat Justin Thomas in a playoff. Keegan was 39th. That's what he placed. He gained 10.7 strokes gained on approach. He lost 6.9 on the greens. If he literally loses 2 strokes on the greens, he may have a top 5 finish right there, just because he gained 10.7 strokes approach. That was his best approach game of his career, at least as long as the database in Fantasy National Golf. the guy is a great iron player. For a guy this low price, you have to play this guy if you're considering this range.
Yeah, for sure. Now, a few other guys I do want to highlight. I was going to highlight Redmond, but you pretty much spoke about him already. Now, another guy that we're looking at here at 6,500, we have Matthew Neesmith. He ranks ninth in my model, 6,500 once again. His ownership is coming in, I believe, not too high. His ownership is at Matthew Neesmith. It's low. It's 3.6, but he, again, ranks ninth in my model, and I'll tell you why. He ranks 11th in strokes gained approach in his last 24 rounds, 15th in strokes gained ball striking, second greens in regulation, and 20th in proximity 150 to 175. Like normal, his putter is what is screwing him over. But for a guy that's that good in greens and regulation, and from what I saw at the Waste Management, I mean, again, if you're going to get a guy like that at $6,500, at 3.6% ownership, but he's that good in terms of greens and reg, I mean, you have to consider this guy. You have to. He gained, listen to this. This was his performance at Farmers this week. And again, this is so similar to Keegan Bradley. He finished 48th, so he made the cut. He was 7.1 strokes gained tee to green, minus 0.8 off the tee. Okay, not that bad. He gained 6.6 on approach, 1.3 around the green, minus 4.8 putting. If he gets that at even putting, he finishes top 15. Like that is the difference right there. And he's not even as bad as Keegan Bradley. He's just had 3 bad putting weeks in a row, but then he gained in 3 of the last 4 before that. So this is a guy that could easily flip a switch. And again, I mentioned that he finished 3 of the out of the he had, look, so obviously I mentioned he had 3 bad weeks in a row, but then before that he had 3 out of 4 good weeks in a row, and he finished top 17 or above all 3 of those times. So I think a guy like Matthew Neesmith is a guy that you could look at here at low ownership, low price, and I think he could play really well this week.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line with the 6K range and the $7,000 range really stems from the putting aspect. If there's a guy with continued success the last, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks putting, you probably have to expect a good amount of regression. So maybe he may be a fade that week. If a guy is consistently gaining approach and losing on the green, but he has that week where he may putt average or maybe above average, and that approach game is really the key factor, he's the guy to play. And these 3 guys we mentioned, the 6K range, perfect. Benyon also, I'll mention him. I think he was a 7K range though.
7-3.
He's an awful putter as well, but he has a great approach game. Just a common theme with these low-owned guys. Can you get a T30 out of them? Can you get a T25, a T20, push it to a T15? And I think you really can. And we discussed it in the Master Show. We both highlighted Fratelli. We loved Fratelli. He found a hot putter. He finished top 5 at the Masters, something like that. And he paid dividends. So
we literally in that show, we outlined the winning lineup for the Masters, and none of us, we were all like, what, me, you especially, you were what like 1 switch or 2 switches away from being.
It was pairing DJ with, I think, Rom or JT, and then you pivoted to Cami Champ and Fratelli, who I played the week before together. They did average, I think. That those 2 were in the optimal lineup. And then you pivot to another guy. I think maybe Kevin Na was in the optimal lineup or something like that. But yeah, the Masters, I guess we could have made a lot of money, but we didn't. But look, that's the game of golf. We have very low stakes in this. And it's fun because we know these guys can really perform well, especially in the lower range, which is why we're doing the Stars and Scrubs lineup this week for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. And that pretty much concludes the DFS slate from a player standpoint. Gun to your head right now, who do you absolutely love that you're absolutely playing this week? For me, it's Xander. Ownership aside, I don't care because whatever. It's not gonna be too much big difference from the 10K range, but Xander's my guy.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe would have said Xander if you didn't mention him first, but I'll say a different guy, just to be different from you here. I think that I don't want to say I don't want to say I'm glued to Rory, but it is going to be appealing if he is that low ownership. But I don't want to give him as like I'm definitely going to play Willie Z. That I will give you. So if we're moving to the 9K range here, Glenn said he's playing Xander, you know, at 11K. Definitely, I will definitely be playing some Willie Z for sure. So that's my one guy. And then I think we outlined a few great low options as well, pretty well. But yeah, that does it for the show. I'm really, really excited to make this a weekly thing. Be sure to comment and let us know what your thoughts are on the show, what else you want us to talk about in the future. Be sure to let us know your favorite plays on the slate this week. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting this going the rest of the time. Remember, as I have up in the corner here, Thrive Fantasy, promo code Burd, BURD. You get it. They'll match your deposit on that. So be sure to look at that. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at sports_Burd. Be sure to follow Glenn on Twitter at Goody21. And yeah, we got to get Glenn some Twitter presence here. He's not a big Twitter user except for criticizing NFL coaches. So
Yes.
we got to get Glenn some Twitter presence. Go
The
give him a
Packers
follow.
got my last Twitter hate. But yeah, I think I had a Patrick Reed tweet as well. But yeah, occasionally on Twitter, mostly when bad things happen, I tend to tweet because I think, how does this happen? Like NFL head coaches. But yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, once again, excited to get this going. But good luck everyone on the DFS slate, and we will see you next week.
Yep. Good luck, everyone.